Okay, hopefully I am recording. All right, so we want to tell you a little bit about the SLA PNW and WLA Special Libraries Division. I can get my screen going here. First of all, we want to talk to you about becoming a member if you are interested in becoming a member. So for WLA, our membership has a number of great benefits, including discounted conference registration fees, great programming, such as what you're seeing today. We have access to Alki magazine, job announcements, and more. Plus, you have access to several great divisions of librarianship, including the wonderful Special Libraries Division. If you're not already a member of WLA, you can add the Special Libraries Division when you register for no additional charge. Individual membership is based on salary, and you can find the full price range on the WLA website, which again, we're going to be putting in the chat for you. WLA also offers organizational memberships, and you can include up to 8 people in your library. If you're already a member of WLA, you can add Special Libraries Division to your membership for just $10. And we've got great programming coming up this year, including a couple more library crawls for you, which we're going to talk a little bit about at the end. And we're going to be participating in the WLA conference and planning on starting some other great things such as a journal article club. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Laura Grove, and she's going to tell you about joining SLA PNW.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Grove. I'm the president of the Special Libraries Association Pacific Northwest chapter this year, and I'm thrilled to see you all here on Zoom. Membership in SLA provides networking opportunities with other librarians in specialized settings, education through an annual conference and other events, leadership development, and industry information such as a salary survey and a career center. Membership in the Pacific Northwest community can be added at no additional charge to an SLA membership. The current publication is Information Insights, which is a weekly curated e-newsletter to keep members apprised of recent developments in the field. Membership rates are posted on the website, and there's a student rate. This year at SLA PNW, we particularly appreciate our collaboration with WLA SLD on events. And I will turn it back to Laura E. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Laura. All right, so without further ado, I am going to turn it over now to my colleague, Judy Pitchford. She's going to introduce you to our first presenter of the evening.
Thanks, Laura. Our first presenter tonight is Barbara Engstrom. Barbara is the director of the Public Law Library of King County and formerly a reference librarian at Seattle University School of Law. Before coming to Seattle University, she was a reference librarian and an adjunct professor at the University of Utah College of Law. Barbara has held leadership positions in the Law Librarians of Puget Sound and the Western Pacific chapter of the American Association of Law Libraries. She is an active member of the American Association of Law Libraries and the Washington State Bar Association. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with a video. So I will just share my screen here and get the video started to introduce you to the King County Law Library. Oh, and I should say the sound is a little low, so you may want to turn up your speakers.
So a quick tour of the King County Law Library. My name is Sean. I will be your guide for the next few minutes. Barbara was going to give the tour. She's getting tea or something, but by the time we're done, she'll be back online to answer any questions that you might have. So let's get started. The library has 2 locations. The main branch is in downtown.
Barbara, I think you need to unmute.
Our Seattle location at given time, and then there's one intrepid soul manning the outpost in Canton. But as with many things these days, the staffing arrangement might have to be tweaked a little bit depending on the traffic when we finally reopen our doors. I should say at this point that as of this recording, we have not yet reopened our doors to the public. If all goes well with vaccinations and public health trends and so forth, we should be reopening in mid-May, perhaps May 17th. So much of what I'll be telling you about life at the law library is based on the before times, how things worked pre-pandemic. We're currently in the process of ironing out what library operations will look like once the gates open. One important thing to make note of is our proximity to court clerk's offices. Here in Seattle, we share the 6th floor of the courthouse with the Superior Court Clerk's office. They're just right across the elevator lobby from us. And in Kent, the clerk's offices are similarly close. This is important because there's a lot of back and forth between our two offices, the library and the clerk. Sometimes patrons will come into the library to get a form or print out a form and then just walk it across the hall to file it. And then just as likely, they might go into the clerk's office first, get told they need a form of some kind, and then come over to the library to find out exactly what form they need. That little guidance. To help orient us on this tour, I thought I'd show you a little map of our Seattle location. We'll be walking from the elevators west through the front doors. We'll take a left turn to the south, go down and then head back north through the staff area up to the north side and end our tour there. As you walk into the library, of course, you're immediately faced with the reference desk. The additional barriers that you see on top of the counter are new in preparation for our reopening. In the before times, the doors were wide open and people could come and go as they wished. But when we do reopen, we'll likely be restricting the number of people who can come in to a number that meets public health guidelines, and probably restrict access to those who actually need help with some legal research. The last year that we have accurate patron statistics for was 2019. During that year, library staff had more than 25,000 patron interactions. It answered over 4,700 substantive preference questions. While the types of questions vary a little between the two branches, Seattle and Kent. For instance, I think it's a higher percentage of probate and Edward tenant type questions. The most common types of questions are shared between the two. Most prevalent are questions from pro se patrons about how they can achieve a specific task in their case. Characterize those as civil procedure types of questions. After that, the most popular are family law, landlord-tenant, and probate. And while many years ago, most library patrons were bar members, either attorneys or judges, that proportion has flipped over the decades. So now, roughly 75% of our patrons are self-represented litigants, public, and about 25 are bar members. Although we have seen percentage of bar members increase just a little bit over the past couple of years as we've made an effort to reach out to them and to make sure that our service offerings set both of those populations. We try to be somewhat egalitarian at the law library. We rotate staff through the front desk throughout the day in roughly 2-hour shifts just to keep everyone fresh. Turning to the left or the south, we will pass our circulation desk. And just beyond that are our public computers. We have 10 here in Seattle and 4 in Kent, but those numbers will likely have to be changed, probably halved or so, in order to allow for social distancing. There are a couple of machines reserved for legal databases such as Westlaw in each location, and the rest offer general internet access and Microsoft Office applications. Traditionally, they've been a pretty big draw for the library. There are lots of people who need to come in and either conduct their legal research online or draft forms before they bring them over to the clerk. Just beyond computers, we have our first row of shelves that contain some reference materials, dictionaries, judges, bench books, and so forth, and what the 1990s might consider a pretty enviable collection of law-related TV shows and movies. Just behind that, we have the bulk of our legal treatise collection. At the very end of that series of rows, at the south end of the library, we find some of the best light in the library, and a nice view of historic Smith Tower, as well as one of our conference rooms. We have a total of 6 conference rooms that can be used, many of which can be made available for paid reservations. Those are very popular, or were very popular at lunchtime with the litigating crowd, but that too will likely change depending on the number of in-person trials being held at either location. But we are getting room reservations coming in. Moving back north, we get to the reference well. Here's our book quarantine bin works. And this over here is perhaps one of the more important rooms in the library, the staff quiet room, where we can go to recharge and where whispers of serenity now might be heard. Continuing past the non-circulating collection of reserved books, we get to what is affectionately known as the Fishbowl, where the very important work of 3 of our librarians takes place. Everyone on the staff has a number of ongoing projects to work on when they're not on the front desk. But I find that one eye and one ear is always open to what's going on up front with the patrons. Everyone on staff is very quick to jump up when it's moving on. We pass the head honcho's office and the desk of one of her minions, and we get to what used to be our training room, but is now another conference room. Please forgive email processing. There are a lot of things in the library that are in a state of transition as we prepare to go. This was converted to a conference room just because those reservations proved to be so popular. We then converted an old archive room into a training room. It's a bit larger, and that's where we'll be hosting our in-person training events whenever those might resume. Continuing north on the west side of the library, we get into our Washington state materials, Washington digests, reporters, of course, as well as some state legislative materials. We have House and Senate journals, bills, digests, and we have a large collection of state Supreme Court briefs. At the very end, we have our lone out-of-state resource, the Annotated California Code. There used to be quite a bit more, but it's gotten pared down. And what I think is the best seat in the house, a little desk with a lovely view of the comings and goings on. Moving over to the northeast corner, we find our federal materials, ALRs, federal reporters, and the United States Code annotated, as well as our collection of bar journals and law reviews. We make use of Pine Online to maintain access to the current journals, but sometimes it's just really refreshing to put your hands on the physical volume. So if you ever need to step away from your computer and crack open, say, the volume 1 of the Harvard Law Review, we've got you covered. Also in this corner of the library are 3 smaller conference rooms that have traditionally been used for legal clinics, where members of the public can meet with an attorney to receive some advice. We've hosted, typically host 3 different clinics, the neighborhood legal clinic, a walk-in clinic, which is very, very popular, and a defense clinic. So today, of course, all those consultations are taking place via telephone, and they probably will, at least for the near future. Time will tell how and when those in-person interactions again. Well, this concludes my very simple introduction to the King County Law Library. Thank you very much for watching. I believe Barbara is back from her tea break, so while I still
thank you all for going on the little tour of the King County Law Library with us. And then I don't know if we're waiting till the end for questions or if we're gonna do questions now.
Well, we will have a question and answer period at the end, but go ahead and add anything else that you would like to add to your video.
So the video was already, 10, 11 minutes long, so we didn't want to overdo it. But with the pandemic, we've really added to our digital resources collection. And one of the things that we're really excited about that we had been trying to do for a very long time, but Laura, as you and Rob can and Mark can attest to, legal publishers are really difficult to work with. And this year there was just a bit of a crack in their resistance to allowing us to give remote access to some of our databases to patrons. So for example, now we can offer remote access to Hein Online, and we've got some other databases that we're able to offer remote access to. So that's been incredibly exciting for us. So I would recommend, if you come visit the Law Library's website, that you take a look at what we have available for remote databases.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara, for that great video and for sharing your law library with us. And we'll come back to you with questions at the end. So now we are going to transition from a county law library to a law firm law library. So I'll turn it over to Judy to introduce our next presenter.
Thanks, Laura. Our next presenter is Mark DeSherto. Mark is the manager of library and research services at Davis Wright Tremaine. He did his undergraduate work at Rutgers University and received his MLIS from the Pratt Institute with an internship in medical librarianship at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. His first library job was in high school, organizing and cataloging flavor samples for a food chemical company. Not many of us can say that, can we? Before his law library career, he spent 10 years in medical librarianship. Mark decided to start law school a week before his first child was born. He attended the University of Baltimore School of Law and has been in law firm librarianship for over 12 years. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura, for the invitation. I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation. I took a rather broad view of a tour of the library. I hope you will indulge me. I'm going to do a lot of talking. I'm going to start sharing now. Can everybody see my screen? I think you're nodding, but I can't see any faces.
Looks good.
Okay. All right. So just a quick intro to the firm first, because it really does guide the services and resources that we provide to our attorneys and staff. And is this going to work? Okay. So we've got actually around 600 lawyers now in 8 offices. Seattle is the home office, the headquarters, very proudly so, with a sizable office in Portland, and growing offices in California, New York, and DC. Can't forget about Anchorage as well. Got a very stable and long-standing practice in Anchorage. Who are our clients? Large banks, wireless companies, some of the bigger broadcasters. We've got a really interesting First Amendment practice. One of our partners in the LA office was just named Entertainment Lawyer of the Year for work he did for Led Zeppelin last year. A lot of the local hospitals and hospital systems, big energy producers, particularly in California. A lot of prominent restaurant and hotel brands. We have a bustling food and beverage practice that's based primarily in Portland. Really interesting work. And last but not least, some of the region's really most prestigious, oldest, most important brands. So again, I took a rather broad view of this tour of the library because, as the National Library Week theme asks us to think about, what is the library? When we say welcome to the library, for us, for private law libraries, increasingly it's no longer a place, it's the people, it's the services, it's the resources. So I really do want to focus on my people first. I have an outstanding team. We are based in many of the offices, but not all of them, even though we do serve the entire firm. We're concentrated in the Pacific Northwest. We've got a couple of folks in DC and in San Francisco. We all have degrees in library science or information science. Some of us are also JDs, so a pretty deep bench. But then again, there's 600 attorneys and 7 full-time researchers, never a shortage of work, which is why I reach out to Barbara and Rob and Laura all the time for help. Organizationally, we live under a group called Knowledge Management. I know that's a term that SLA is also very familiar with, tasked with a lot of things connecting data to the attorneys and practice groups when they need it, whether it's financial data, client information, document solutions. I'll talk about the 3 prongs really quickly. Document solutions is, how to automate contracts. We do a lot of work with big technology companies who want to do all their contracting online. The KM group is charged with creating those templates. KM Solutions is sort of a broad umbrella of all kinds of technological tools for serving our clients, whether it's putting M&A deals in the cloud so that our clients can connect to that information quickly and seamlessly, or internal document solutions, management solutions for the many, many, many contracts and motions and everything that the firm drafts, and organizing that and making that retrievable. And last but not least is the library team. So we'll focus on the library. What is it that we do? I'll move through this pretty quickly. Background research on individuals. This is public records. This is assets. This is liabilities. This is addresses for litigation purposes or what have you. We do some degree of social media research. That's a very, it's a quickly evolving area of what we do. A lot of sensitive information for sure that we're dealing with there. Business and corporate research, more or less what it sounds like. So we're talking about financial data. We're talking about states of incorporation. We're talking about international companies, private companies, public companies, filings, you name it. Competitive intelligence. Again, I know this is a big topic in the SLA world as well. How is our firm doing compared to other firms in the area, other practices, so on and so forth. The other prong of competitive intelligence that I'm sure everybody has been hearing about is data analytics, and it's really impacting the litigation side of private law firms in a major way. The amount of data that's being parsed now from dockets, for example, to determine which attorneys worked on it, how quickly it went to trial, how law firms fare in particular courts or in front of particular judges. The granularity of that data is very exciting. It's very expensive, but that's certainly an area where a lot of big companies have focused their investments. Current awareness, alerting and tracking. So we're talking about keeping our attorneys informed of developments in their practice areas or in their jurisdictions. And we'll take a quick look at what that means in a little bit. Document and article retrieval. This is when I shoot an email over to the State Law Library or to Barbara's team, who's wonderful. We need this legislative history for this piece of, for this bill that we've never heard of from 1979. It can mean that. It can also mean we're deposing this person, we need to see everything that he's written from engineering journals, from scientific articles, so on and so forth. Or it can really mean something as simple as obtain this docket from this jurisdiction that's a little outside of our wheelhouse. We support a lot of internal strategic efforts at the firm. And that's really important to us. We'll talk about that a little more in a bit. Legal research, pretty much what it sounds like. What is the state of wage and hour law in Washington as opposed to Oregon, as opposed to California? I will note that while we do have some JDs on the team, it's an important distinction in law firms that, in most law firms at least, that the law librarians don't actually practice law. We leave that to the attorneys, but certainly it becomes a pain point from time to time. Research consultation, everybody is familiar on this call with the reference interview process. And last but not least, procurement, which is really just helping attorneys gain access to subscriptions, to apps, to software that they need to practice law, and negotiating with the vendors, as Barbara mentioned, to make that happen. So I mentioned before, how important it is, and this is something that sort of surprised me coming into private law firms. Actually, is there are always trade-offs with the kinds of libraries you end up in, but I have to say that this firm in particular has been really supportive of each of us, staff and attorneys, really being our authentic selves. We take diversity, equity, and inclusion very seriously. I'm super proud that my team was able to launch a firm-wide book club last year, actually pre-protests and all the civil unrest from last summer. We've been working on this for some time. So quarterly now, we've been reading a book with as many attorneys and staff that will join us, and then having a nice, old school but Zoom-based book club. It's really been well received around the firm. Pro bono and social impact is something we also take very seriously. Sue Mecklem on the call today, who is an active member of SLA, was one of the firm's leading phone bankers. Super proud of her efforts. And the firm really just believes and supports access to justice in all its forms. I was able to write an article that's been posted to the firm's external website regarding my experiences. Again, I just didn't think that this was feasible in a private law firm, but things are changing certainly, but this firm in particular is really supportive of librarians and all staff having their own voices. These are the top 10 users of our services by practice group. Pretty much comports with the size of each group. I can't give away the exact numbers or the exact resources that we deploy for contractual privacy purposes, but we do a ton of work for these groups. I can say that we took about 10,000 requests in 2020, and we're on pace to exceed that this year. And those range from substantive requests, real legal research, deep dive stuff, to can you please find this complaint for me? The collection, we'll take a look at a couple of pictures. We've got about 8,000 records in our catalog, but that doesn't really include deep links into the major databases that we provide. We do have print collections in each and every office. We're not quite centralized in Seattle in that regard, as some other law firms are. We do have print collections in each and every office. I call out Seattle, Bellevue, and Washington in particular because each of those offices moved in the past 3 years. And as you all know, a library move is a big deal. In Seattle, we cut 80% of our print collection. So we are very, very focused on online. We're also very focused in membership libraries and consortia. Barbara and her team have been incredibly supportive in making sure that we can provide access to the things that we can no longer physically store. And we also work increasingly with a number of document retrieval companies. I'm trying to check for time. Please feel free to let me know if I'm going long. I can't really look at the chat at the same time. Oops, I hope I didn't break it. And PowerPoint just crashed. And it's coming back. Sorry, folks. Let me do this. Let's do this instead. Can you all still see this? Okay.
Yes.
It's not the ideal view, but it'll get us moving faster. Where was I? Yeah, we work a lot more with document retrieval companies of all shapes and sizes. The impact that the pandemic's had on that entire piece of our service has been massive, as you might imagine. You know, you'd think that attorneys who can't go into courts anymore would realize that there's a connection between those courts being closed and other people not being able to get into those courts, whether they're in the archives or whether they're runners. But yeah, that's all I'll say about that. It's been hard to convey to some folks that, hey, you know, when the court is closed because of pandemic, it means it's closed. It doesn't mean that we can just go in there and continue to get Court of Appeals dockets from 1989 on a whim. So I'll leave that right there. Now the challenges, just the sheer volume of requests. Got 7 full-time researchers serving about 600 attorneys and about 500 more staff. Client billing and cost recovery. This is always a challenge in the private law firm world. You know, our librarians are timekeepers. We do bill for our work. But certainly in many firms, that's not the case. So this idea of, you know, justifying your existence, your sunken cost, you're on the wrong side of the ledger, all those metaphors apply. And how much do we charge clients? Do we charge clients at all? A lot of clients increasingly just think that research should be included in the price of engagement. They're not wrong, but somehow those costs have to be allocated and covered. Remote access is the name of the game for a year now. Vendor management, as Barbara mentioned, there have been new opportunities thanks to the pandemic, I guess, is one way to put it. But licensing, you know, doesn't scale well. If we have a copy of the Puget Sound Business Journal in our office that can get routed to 20, 30, 40 attorneys, that's cool. But when they're working remotely and we provision them with a login that's just for their use, clearly you see how the dollar amounts scale up exponentially very quickly. And then just managing expectations for print, given the remote setting. This is something we deal with on an almost daily basis now. It wasn't too bad at the beginning of COVID, but now as books have rolled over into new editions, there is some expectation that attorneys receive their court rules at home, receive their updated treatises at home, and that's been a tough one to tackle and convey and convince. Print upkeep in the remote environment, obviously, all related to everything I just said. You know, am I liable for updating Colliers that lives in an attorney's home in San Francisco? Like, it's just not feasible. Okay, let's look at the libraries really fast. The DC office just moved to K Street. So that's why these shelves are really quite nice. We keep certain books in more than one location, surprisingly, despite the cost. I believe this is, it's not in this picture, but we've got multiple copies of Collier's and of some contracts, treatises. You know, the idea is that the collection reflects the needs of that office. This is our Portland office, the Wells Fargo Center. Seattle again moved in November of 2018. There's a reference desk that no one has sat at for the past 13 months or so now. My technician's going to kill me for showing this picture, but she's still been going in about twice a week to process print. I will send a prize to whoever knows what's in these boxes. Our general collection is laid out on each floor, and each floor is where, so our practices are kind of divvied among the different floors. So the collection accordingly lives on each of those floors. We've got some of the old stuff, not nearly as much as the State Law Library nor King County, but in a pinch, we do have older King County code, older Seattle code. Looks like a box of binders. You're close. I'm reading the chat here. This is more of the Seattle General Collection now. You'll see the Washington annotated code here. Still got some reporters, incredibly. Last but not least, got distancing stickers on the floors now, and we've got sanitizer. Last challenge, this came up in my photo feed when I was putting this together. Working from home and trying to concentrate on important client work while making gluten-free pizza for your kids. Don't try it. This was an incredibly burned gluten-free pizza that I tried to make for my kids last year. That's all I got. Really feel free to contact me at mark@DwT.com. I'm happy to take any questions. I've been in special libraries for quite some time now, so always happy to chat.
Mark, thank you so much for your great presentation. We really appreciate you sharing your library with me. And Rob, you're gonna love me at tomorrow, because or next week, I'm gonna come to you with all the ideas that I've gotten from looking at these other two libraries.
Awesome.
I've been taking notes.
We like change.
All right, Mark, unless you have any final comments before we get to our third library, I will go ahead and get Judy I already introduced myself, so I will get Judy to introduce you to our state law librarian, and we will be showing you a tour of the state law library.
Okay, so last but not least is Rob Mead. Rob became director of the Washington State Law Library in 2016. He is a librarian lawyer with an extensive background in law libraries and law firms, including the New Mexico Office of the Public Defender. Rob also has experience teaching legal research skills, and I know you like to do that, Rob. I've heard you say that often, and I think Laura should say more about herself. But okay, we'll continue on with Rob.
Right.
Go for it, Rob.
Okay, so
Okay, welcome, and I'm going to let Laura share our video first, right?
all right. Okay, can somebody just give me a thumbs up if they can see this?
We can see it.
Great. Okay, here we go.
Welcome to the State Law Library, housed in the Temple of Justice on Capitol Campus in Olympia. My name is Rob Mead. I'm the State Law Librarian. Along with my Deputy Law Librarian for Public Services, Laura Edmonston, we're going to give you a tour today. The library was started being built in 1913 and was completed in 1920 and was the first building built on Capitol campus. It was originally built to house the Supreme Court, the Attorney General, and the State Library. And in the 50s, we split with the State Library, so only the Law Library is now in this building. The main reading room is illuminated by two large brass chandeliers created by Tiffany & Company in 1921, famous for the stained glass Tiffany lamps and jewelry. There are two matching chandeliers in the courtroom. Both are inscribed with symbols of the law, including scales, the sword of justice, and stone tablets. Much of the wood shelving and tables are original, giving the room a feel of deep history and purpose. We also have the best views in town, with the Capitol Dome out of the southern windows and Capitol Lake and Bud Bay out of the northern windows. Although many of our visitors come just for the beauty of the library, at least they did before the pandemic, and will again at some day, the real value of the library comes from our deep historical legal collection and the law librarians who organize it and help patrons find what they need. We serve as the primary law library for the judicial system of Washington, the Attorney General's office, the other state agencies, the legislature, private bar, and the citizens of the state of Washington. Washington legal publications are housed mostly in the main reading room. These include Washington Reports, the Revised Code of Washington, the Washington Administrative Code, session laws, historical statutes, the legislative bills back to 1913, Washington practice, and a wide variety of topical legal treatises about Washington law. In the room next to the main reading room, we have the original metal stacks, which house a variety of federal law, including statutes, Supreme Court case reporters, and a wide range of national legal treatises. Above those stacks is a mezzanine level, accessible by either elevator or kind of a tight, steep original staircase. We now house the National Reporter System with cases from other states on this level. And the level above that are the chambers for the Supreme Court. So on this level, we've moved all of our primary law, cases, statutes, and regulations next to our most frequently used treatises, so lawyers can find most of what they need, most of what they use most of the time in one place.
Welcome to the downstairs reading room of the State Law Library. I'm Laura Edmonston, Deputy Law Librarian. While this room may not possess the visual grandeur of the main reading room, it still holds some of the most vital and interesting pieces of the Law Library collection. On this floor, members of the legal community and general public have access to online legal databases such as Hein Online and CaseMaker via our computer terminals. The east side of the library holds print law reviews and journals. Here you will also find superseded legal research materials such as the Washington Practice Series. Superseded materials are past editions that have been replaced with current authority and are kept in the collection because lawyers, judges, or even self-represented patrons may need to see versions of the law or text from a particular time period. A primary purpose of this section of the library is to hold treatises for multiple areas of legal research. Where the most recent edition or the most popular items can be found upstairs in the main reading room, you'll find additional copies of many of those items here, along with previous versions of core materials such as Black's Law Dictionary, a resource that is key to a law library collection. One of the most important parts of the law library collection is this area that contains our appellate briefs. Legal briefs are arguments that are written by both parties and presented to the court. It's a way for them to state their case in writing before even having to step into the courtroom. Our law library has the largest collection of appellate briefs in the state of Washington, and this section with the Supreme Court briefs dates back to Washington Territory. We'll conclude our tour with a look at the law library's Supreme Court and general legal history materials. Highlights of this collection include video recordings of oral arguments, state constitutional history, and biographies of the members of the Washington State Judiciary. Here you will also find rare copies of early American case law and treatises, along with a transcript of the Nuremberg doctor's trial, which was presided over by State Supreme Court Justice Walter B. Beals. This shelf contains the very first books acquired for the law library. Purchased in New York by Washington Territory's first governor, the books were shipped around Cape Horn, arriving in Olympia in February 1854. Like nearly all libraries, we've had to close our doors to walk-in traffic during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we've been able to offer full online reference service and even curbside checkouts and returns.
On behalf of the Washington State Law Library staff, we want to thank you for taking this virtual tour with us. We hope to be able to greet you in person when our doors are open again.
In the meantime, we invite you and your own library visitors to submit legal research questions to us at library.requests@courts.wa.gov or 360-357-2136. See you soon.
See you soon. So I'd just like to add just a couple more things before we open up to questions. We are we share things with both the King County Law Library and Mark's firm library. One of the things we share with the firm library is we are legal researchers for the appellate courts and do a lot for the Attorney General and other people. So in 2019, before the pandemic, we hit 10,000 questions for the first time since 1992, sort of at the beginning of the internet era. And so we took a big dip with the internet and now we're back up. A lot of those questions are public questions like Barbara's. So we're sort of an access to justice agency. But one of the big differences for our library is I see us as the historical law library of last resort. We hold on to print copies of things, deep historical collection. UW is a magnificent law library. We have other places in the state that do a great job too, but that's one of the roles I see is, and our court site checks every single case against the print. So we have a really good reason to keep collecting print. Economics prevent us from collecting everything. We're sort of slowly backing away from the national reporter system and getting page images on Westlaw. But we will continue to collect print for as long as I can. So that's Laura, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I just wanted to add that, during the COVID-19 pandemic, as Rob mentioned, we do have to do the site checking from the print. So we've had a librarian on staff, and it's going to be quite a transition when we open our doors again. I'm practicing not being startled when somebody walks through the door, but yes, so we haven't missed a beat. We've introduced curbside service, and it's been great to work with other libraries, and we've gotten a really helpful assist from the state library and from archives, and having folks return our books there. So I really feel like the law library space is a very collaborative space, and it really makes our job so much easier when we can call in help from folks like King County and all of our firm libraries and things like that. So yeah, and we just want to stress that we are a public library, and we do want you to, if you have any questions, any legal questions from your library users, to give us a call, send a referral over, and we're happy to help. All right, anything else, Rob?
Just happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, so we will move now to our Q&A, the Q&A portion of our library crawl, and we'll open the floor to our participants, and our presenters will be here to answer any questions you might have. Yeah, so go ahead and you can turn your video back on too so we can see you. There we go.
We haven't had a lot of questions come in via the chat, but I've got some to get started. I took a little list of my own. For the King County Law Library, I think I saw in the video you had a training room near the end. I was wondering like what kind of trainings you do in that. Was that for the public, and will you be returning to that, or was it more kind of internal training?
So the training room right now, well, in the before times, as Sean liked to call it, we have CLEs probably twice a month for attorneys. And then prior to my coming to the law library, they did a lot of workshops for the public. And we just have not done as many of those lately. I don't know when that stopped or why, but that's something that we're thinking about starting up again. I know one of the things that Sean mentioned in the video was how important forms are for what we do. People go to the clerk's office, they need a form, and they get sent to us, and then they want us to help them fill out the forms, and that would be practicing law, so we can't do it. And so one of the things that I really want to do is just start having like a forms drafting lab. And so hopefully we'll be using some of our space for things like that. So, I had like a whole plan for doing that, and it was all based on people coming in and doing it in-house. But now it's really like, I'm just rethinking the whole thing, and I think a lot of it's going to be virtual. So honestly, like how much use is that like room going to get now that we all use Zoom all the time for everything?
Thank you. And Mark, I was wondering what kind of hours I saw the hours that you've served, but what kind of hours do the librarians in your firm work? Is it kind of like an 8-hour day, or is it just like based on whatever your deadlines are, it needs to happen? How does that work in a private firm like that?
Great question. We different private firms do it differently. We have shifts. We haven't been doing it for terribly long, but it seems to be working out. It amounts to about 3 hours a day. And I try not to micromanage. Everything seems to work out. We have a couple of folks on the East Coast who have to work those hours because they're the two on the East Coast. We've also managed to hire temporary law librarians from time to time if volume's been really high or if there's been a special project. So we have one on board right now because we've got all kinds of National Library Week events going on. So we've been able to find someone to fill in for a couple of hours a day. But basically we're a shift work model.
Thank you. And State Law Library, and your incredible, looks like the set of Columbo in there. I was wondering, have any films ever been filmed in your library? Do you know?
Oh, no, Laura?
I don't know that we've had any films filmed in there. We've had plenty of requests. My favorite request that we got was somebody wanted to film an episode of, I think it was Ghost Hunters. I think it was one of the ghost hunting shows. We get plenty of requests to do research for people who are making films and or TV shows. We got a question from one of the major networks the other day. We get tons of questions from novelists. I'm sure you do as well, Barbara, at King County. But yeah, people want to know what the laws are at a particular time so they can refer to that in their mystery novel, which is wonderful. And I always want to go back and look and see what they've written. But no, we have not had any filming other than just, official. We do a lot of interviews and things like that. We do have, I've had a couple of wonderful instances where we've had people just come to the main reference desk with their mouth wide open and they'll say something like, I've only ever seen something like this in the movies. And it just makes you really, it's one of those light bulb moments that you're thinking, wow, I really don't take this space for granted because it is just a spectacular space to work in.
Yeah, this is my 4th law library. This is easily the most beautiful law library I've been in. There's a few pretty ones like Law Library of Congress and such, but this one's stunning. One of the quirky things is we're tenants. So we rent our space from DES, what Department of Enterprise Services. And so they have to approve any filming or things like that, unless it's nonprofit or the work of the court or something like that. And they, of course, will take their pound of flesh. And so we haven't, we don't get to make some of those calls.
Fascinating. And then one more question, just for everybody. I was wondering, like, if you think after we're kind of through the pandemic, if there will be any sort of remote work changes to your, the way things work there. Do you think there'll be any lasting impacts even after, in theory, the pandemic is over?
I could easily see my librarians working, 1 day a week at home. I don't think for the nature of our library and our work that full-time work at home would make sense, but there are certainly plenty of things that can be done at home. But I would leave that, state employees, I'd leave that up to, negotiated schedule sort of thing, as opposed to requirement or an automatic approval.
Video reference interviews are something also that we've done 2 or 3 times now, and those have been something that I definitely see as a lasting effect. Same with curbside service might be something that we continue to do because it seems to be popular, and especially on the Capitol campus, parking can be a real challenge. And so having that extra point of access for our patrons is, I think, going to be something that we definitely want to explore keeping around.
Yeah, I think some of these changes wouldn't say permanent for us, but practice of law didn't stop. And even though the attorneys couldn't get hold of their treatises, so but there are a lot of factors for sure. What the court systems decide to do, commercial real estate prices, and longer term trends. Much like looking in a treatise and getting context and serendipity and all that, there is something to be said about running into your colleagues and sharing knowledge that way and sharing the quick tips. So I'd hate for that to be lost. But all that said, my reference team has been 100% remote for most of the past 11 plus months.
And I would just say, we've always felt really tied to our branches. We have a branch in Kent and we have the branch in Seattle. And during the pandemic, we all got laptops. And so now I just feel like, wow, we could really do a lot more outreach. We already do some partnering with the King County Library System and the Seattle Public Library, where we go in and do workshops for self-represented litigants. But the Family and Juvenile Justice Center up on 12th Avenue and First Hill is going to get a lot busier. And I've just been thinking about, like, well, we've got laptops now. We could just have a librarian up there, because as you saw, our statistics, family law is a huge part of what we do. And as more of those cases maybe move up to that center, I mean, it would be important for us to have a presence up there. And before I would have thought, oh, there's no way we could do that. And now I'm just like, well, I'm sure we could figure out a way to do it, even if it is, we have a kiosk up there and we have remote service for people. So I think it's just really opened up a lot of possibilities where you might have said there's no way before, and now it's like, well, let me think about that. So it's kind of fun. It's really interesting to think about all the different possibilities.
And then we got another question, a follow-up from Connie in chat, specifically for you, Laura and Rob. With curbside service, do you have a specific staff person assigned, just like the reference desk duty?
Well, right now we have one reference librarian on site at all times. So whoever is just happens to be working the reference desk that day is the librarian assigned to curbside. So I guess the answer is yes.
If I can add, we're not a law library, but the state library does have a specific person assigned during certain times to do curbside. It just makes it easier and more efficient to do that.
Our parking stinks since we're right next to the Capitol building. And for our patrons, there's just no parking. It's, you know, a block away at best to get parking. So I think curbside is going to continue just because, you know, a lot of our patrons just want the book, and they call ahead, say, can you hold this book for me? And then they park illegally and come running in to get the book. And it's just a service that doesn't cost us much in terms of time, but to run the book out to them rather than having them park illegally and run the book in to get the book, run in to get the book. So we'll see.
Great.
Can I ask a question to, you know, this is actually applicable to Mark and you, Laura and Rob. I'm interested in, you know, Mark, you said you have attorneys with print sets that need to be updated in their homes. And then I'm wondering, do the justices have, you know, books in their chambers that you have to update? And what the heck have you been doing with that? You know, like, how are you updating these things? Because it's incredibly expensive to buy the updates. And then if you're not able to use them, that I just, like, my mind is going nuts here. I'm thinking of, like, you're having to go into individual offices and, you know, even geographic locations that are so far apart and update these things.
Yeah, so we have 3 branch libraries in each of the 3 Court of Appeals in Tacoma, Seattle, and Spokane. We've done a fairly good job with Tacoma. We've been avoiding Seattle like a plague since it's in a high rise, and Spokane has gotten the short end of the stick because normally we would drive out with the books 2 or 3 times a year or fly out to do all the updating. A lot of our books are wrapped up in a library maintenance agreement with Thomson Reuters, so we're stuck buying them for a 10-year contract. So part of our library is full of copies of updates right now. So when the pandemic's over, we're going to have to spend a lot of time updating. But we've been mailing some. Sort of depends on who asks. Different judges want different things updated at different times right now. Some of them haven't been in their offices for 13 months. Others go in every day.
We've suspended shipments of updates, or I've tried to. We're wrapped up in some of the same contracts that Rob was talking about. For the stuff that's in attorney homes, you know, I hate to say this while we're being recorded, I don't know if the attorneys are noticing that these are not up to date. You know, why would they know? So this chapter is just unfolding right now as books turn over, as court rules turn over for the year, as certain treatises turn over for the year. Attorneys are starting to realize that this is a problem, just starting to realize. I'm not sure what we're going to do.
Great.
So another question came in the chat. Will the Washington State Law Library continue kiosks set up at Pierce County Library as in pre-COVID?
I'm going to give a shout out to our partners in the Pierce County Law Library. So each of the county law libraries are a separate entity. We sort of work together through the Washington Association of County Law Libraries. But Lori at the Pierce County Law Library has done a wonderful job of reaching out to the Pierce County libraries and working with them. And I think her plan is to continue post-pandemic, but I haven't gotten confirmation on that. I haven't asked her. But they've been doing branch, in Gig Harbor, if I remember correctly, they've been doing branch kiosks. And it's a great program. Maybe Barbara might know more.
As far as I know, she's planning on continuing that. It's been very popular, and she does have 2 branches. I can't, for the life of me, remember what the second branch is right now. I think it's Lakewood, but I'm not sure. But yeah, they just, you know, it's a fabulous service, and I mean, I hope that kiosk concept takes off because, you know, that's something I'd love to do in King County. It's just super expensive. Incredibly expensive to do. So they were able to get some funding to do that. But yeah, I think that's a fabulous idea.
Another question came in from Maura. Did anybody receive any CARES Act funding for their libraries? no from King County?
We tried. The Judiciary's CARES Act money all went to trying to get jury trials up and running. Washington is doing better than most states on jury trials. I read in the paper today that they're 3 years behind. I don't know how that is. If you're just down for a year, how do you get 3 years behind? I'm a little suspicious of that number, but that's what King County Superior Court's setting. So we'll see.
So the with the county law libraries, we are all these weird, except for Lori and Pierce County, they were incorporated into their county, but the rest of us are all of these weird hybrid things where we're not part of the county. So we're not actually part of King County. We're more like a sewer district or a cemetery district. So we have a board of trustees, and that's our fiduciary oversight body. So we fall through the cracks all the time. And this is a perfect example of how we fall through the cracks, because I tried to get money from King County and they said, oh, sorry, you're not part of the county. And then, you know, as a nonprofit, you could get money, but we're incorporated as, or we're not incorporated, but we're analogous to one of these special districts. So we're not a nonprofit, even though we have a separate nonprofit that supports the library, but that, you know, we were not eligible. So it's, you know, been really hard, because it's like, I see everybody else getting like the PPE sneeze guard screens and like all this money thrown at them for, you know, all this stuff that is exactly what the pandemic is supposed to be doing, you know, helping, or that CARES Act money is supposed to be helping with, and then we have to pay out of pocket for it. So it's incredibly frustrating that, you know, that our status has really left us high and dry with that money. So I appreciate that question, because I get on my soapbox a little.
Well, are there any more questions? Because if not, now might be a good moment to do for Laura E. to do our final wrap up before we go to breakout rooms.
Okay. All right, before we go to our breakout rooms, we just wanted to let you know that this is the first of a series of library crawls. So our next library crawl is going to be this summer in June. It's going to be, we are really excited about it. You will be introduced to the world of tribal libraries. So we have 3 tribal libraries lined up. It's going to be June 10th from noon to 1:30 p.m. So grab your lunch and join us to learn about some tribal libraries in our region. And we will have a link to that for you to register, and we'll be advertising it in all of our spaces. So I will stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Laura G, and she'll put us in our breakout room so we can get to know each other a little better. And again, I want to thank our presenters today. This has been wonderful. And I've even learned about, I'm a law librarian, and I've even learned more than I knew about law libraries. So thank you again for taking the time to share with us. Laura G, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Laura E. So the breakout rooms, here's how this is going to work. Laura E is going to switch so that I am the host and control the breakout rooms. I've set up several rooms, and the plan is to have 4 people per room. And then we're going to talk for about 10 minutes, maybe 15, we'll see how it goes. And then we'll all come back into the main room just to say hello and wrap up at the very end. So you will suddenly find yourself being switched from the main room to a breakout room. And I am going to start transferring people to breakout rooms right now. Okay. Enjoyed your smaller conversations in the breakout rooms, and I was lovely to see you all, even if only over Zoom. And okay, and Laura E is back also. Laura E, did you, or any of the other organizers of the event, did you have any last minute things you wanted to say?
Just
No?
thanks everybody for coming, and we hope that you will join us for tribal libraries. And as Laura G said, is there anything that any of our other organizers want to say before we go?
Oh, I guess I should just note that the next one is a lunchtime event. So we're trying to kind of switch it around for different schedules. So the next one's in June and it's going to be 12 to 1:30. So hopefully you can either do it as part of work time or a lunch break, whatever works for you. And feel free to share that link far and wide with anyone you know who might be interested. So
Yes.
everyone's welcome to these events, even though, you know, we're encouraging membership to SLA and WLA. We want to keep them open and accessible to everyone who's interested in special librarianship. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Laura.
And thanks to our presenters. Thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Had a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks,
Glad to hear
Barbara.
it. Thank you. Still here. Good. Hey, and it's 7:30 on the dot. Okay. Here's to us.